1977, the Golden Dragon Massacre. That name, it's chilling.
It really is.
But it's so important to remember this wasn't just some random event, was it?
No, not at all. It was really the terrible endpoint of years of conflict building up in San Francisco's Chinatown.
Years of escalating violence, and right in the middle of it was this group, sometimes called Chung Ching Yee, other times the Joe Boys.
That's the one. A gang with a few identities definitely central to the story.
So today, that's what we're diving into. Their story, where did they come from, what were they about, and how did it all lead to, well, to that tragic end?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for listeners who want to get a solid grasp of this complex history quickly, we're working from a really detailed historical overview of Chung Ching Yee.
Okay.
It covers their formation, their activities,
Yeah.
The illegal stuff, the violence, and it lays out a timeline. Key events, the violence connected to them. We'll pull out the crucial bits.
Good. So our mission here is clear. Understand the rise and the fall of Chung Ching Yee, or the Joe Boys. What drove them? How did they fit into Chinatown back then? And yeah, why did it get so violent?
Right. It's a complicated picture.
Okay, so where does it start? Seems like one name keeps popping up. Joe Fong.
That's the key figure definitely at the beginning. Late 60s, the group starts pretty simply. They're just the Joe Fong Boys, named right after him.
Makes sense.
But then, early 1972, there's a shift. They adopt the name Chung Ching Yee.
Chung Ching Yee. That sounds
Correct.
significant, more formal.
It is, and the inspiration is fascinating. It comes from heroes in that classic Chinese novel, The Water Margin.
Oh, wow. The Water Margin. Aren't those stories about, like, honorable outlaws
Yeah.
fighting corruption?
Exactly. So taking that name, maybe they were trying to say something,
Yeah.
frame themselves as, fighting against injustice, or maybe just aiming for a different kind of respect, even through crime.
So it suggests a change in ambition, maybe? How they saw themselves?
Could be a reach for a more, I guess, elevated identity than just a street name.
Interesting. But that name, Chung Ching Yee, it didn't last forever.
No, it didn't. Later on, especially after Joe Fong was imprisoned, it simplified again, back to just the Joe Boys.
Huh. So the elaborate name kind of faded without him.
Seems that way. They also had this numerical thing, 1028.
1028, what's that?
It's code for JBS. J is the 10th letter, B the 2nd, S the 8th. Back to Joe Boys, essentially.
Clever. And they had colors, too.
Yep. Gray, black, maybe navy blue. Adds another layer to their group identity, right? The name, the number, the colors.
Definitely makes them seem more organized, or at least trying to project that image. Okay, they didn't just appear out of nowhere. What was happening in Chinatown at the time?
That's crucial context. You have to look at the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965.
Right, that changed immigration quotas, didn't it?
Big time. It led to a huge influx of new immigrants, especially from Hong Kong into Chinatown, and that created friction, new dynamics.
Friction with who? Other immigrant groups.
Actually, initially, within the Chinese community itself. This is where the Huaqing come in.
Okay, the Huaqing, another major group in this story.
Right. They actually formed a bit earlier, 1964, and their original goal, to protect these newly arrived kids from Hong Kong.
Protect them from who?
From the established Chinese Americans, the American-born Chinese, or ABCs, who were already there. There was bullying, discrimination.
Wow. So tensions between the newcomers and the established community.
Exactly. Intra-ethnic tension.
And Joe Fong himself talked about this, according to the source. He said the ABCs called the new arrivals FOBs, fresh off the boat, or even China bugs. He said the ABCs saw themselves as totally separate, not just Chinese. Really shows that divide.
Yeah, that paints a picture. So the Huaqing started as protectors, but they didn't stay that way.
No, their role, it evolved, or devolved, depending on how you look at it. They shifted towards being more like a typical street gang.
How so?
Getting involved in illegal gambling rackets in Chinatown. Started as lookouts, maybe protection, but then demanding a cut. So from protectors to racket operators, that's quite a shift. And they got pulled into politics, too.
Yeah, the established Chinatown leadership, many with ties to the anti-communist side in Taiwan, the Kuomintang.
Okay.
They were wary of any pro-communist stuff, like Red Guard rallies happening at the time. And reports say they hired youth gangs, including Huaqing members, to basically bust up these rallies.
Using them as muscle.
Pretty much muscle for political ends.
It's wild how that initial purpose just morphed. What makes a group change like that?
Well, power, money. The lure of illegal gambling profits is strong. And once you're seen as a group that uses force...
Others want to use you.
Exactly. Other factions see you as useful. It's a pattern you see sometimes. Initial goals get blurry, opportunities arise, power grows.
Who the Watching are already on this complex path. Protectors, then gambling, political muscle, and this leads to more splits, right? The Yaolai.
Precisely. Around 68, the Watching gets sort of absorbed into the Hop Sing Tong.
Hop Sing Tong, one of the big established Chinatown associations.
Yeah. One of the traditional tongs, often social groups, mutual aid, but sometimes darker connections too.
Right.
And not everyone in the Watching likes this merger. So in 69, a faction breaks off. They call themselves the Yaolai. Means good fortune.
And Zhou Fong, he was part of this Yaolai group.
Initially, yes. He was with the Yaolai after they split from the Watching Hop Sing Tong merger.
Okay, so now I've got the Hop Sing Tong with some Washing, the breakaway Yaolai with Zhou Fong. It sounds like a recipe for rivalry.
Definitely. And the source mentions another established group, the Sui Sing Tong. There was already bad blood between them and the Hop Sing Tong, and now that extended to these newer groups like Yaolai.
So more conflict.
And Zhou Fong was right in it. The source says he was personally involved in violence against the Sui Sing, even going over to the East Bay to confront them.
Really getting his hands dirty early on.
Yep. And that led to trouble. He got arrested, ended up doing 6 months in a reformatory in spring 1971.
Okay, so even before he forms his own name gang, he's doing time for gang-related violence.
That's right. He was already part of that violent world.
And it seems like he didn't want to stay part of the Yaolai either. He wanted his own thing.
That seems to be the driving force. Even before that reformatory sentence, early 71, he had actually broken away from the main Yaolai group already.
Oh, okay.
Tried to go independent. Then after he got out of the reformatory, his group was briefly pulled back in. But it didn't stick.
Didn't last.
Nope. By October 71, he breaks away again, this time for good, taking a key lieutenant, Raymond Lung, with him.
Okay, so they strike out on their own.
But then, tragedy strikes almost immediately. Raymond Lung is murdered the very next day.
Wow. The day after they break away.
The very next day. It just shows how incredibly volatile and dangerous things were. Retaliation was swift and brutal.
That's intense. And after that, Fong makes a move. Changes things up.
He does. After Lum's murder, he shifts his base of operations out to the Richmond district, kind of on the western edge of the city.
Away from the heart of Chinatown.
Yeah. And that's when, early 72, he renames the group. That's when they become Chung Ching Yee.
Ah, okay. So the move and the water margin name happen right after this violent split and Lung's death.
Seems directly connected.
And around this time, he tries to connect with the authorities. Meeting Mayor Alioto, what was that about? The source has different versions, right?
It does. It's murky. One story is he wanted to give the mayor inside info on crime in Chinatown.
Okay, be an informant maybe.
Possibly. The other story, he wanted to complain about police corruption and the lack of social programs for kids in the community. Highlight the systemic issues.
Two very different motives. Providing intel versus advocating for the community.
Exactly. The source doesn't land definitively on one.
Yeah.
But whatever his reason, the meeting never happened.
It didn't?
No. And that same night, the police raided Fong's headquarters.
Whoa. So instead of a meeting, he gets raided.
Right. And after that, the Zhou boys, or Chung Ching Yee, they faced heat not just from the Watching, but increasingly from the police too.
So trying to engage with the system, whatever his reason, totally backfired.
Spectacularly. It really put them in a tight spot, caught between the rival gangs and law enforcement who maybe just saw them all as trouble.
Yeah, no easy position. And this failure, the raid, does that push things towards all-out war with the Watching?
It certainly didn't help de-escalate things. By 1973, the source says the conflict had exploded. A full-blown war between Chung Ching Yee and the Watching.
A war.
And the numbers are grim. The source notes 13 lives had already been lost in this conflict just since 1969.
13 people, that's a lot, even before the Golden Dragon.
It shows this wasn't just sporadic fights. It was sustained, deadly violence over years.
And then Zhou Fong himself gets taken off the board.
Right in the middle of this escalating war. He's arrested in October 72, and then in February 73, he starts serving a life sentence for attempted murder.
Life sentence. So the leader, the founder, is gone. But the war, it keeps going.
It does. And interestingly, it's after Fong is imprisoned that the name Chung Ching Yee seems to fade, and they become known mostly as the Zhou Boys again.
Like that symbolic name needed him there to sustain it.
That's a good way to put it. Plausible, definitely. And yeah, even without Fong on the street, the violence, the tit-for-tat between the Zhou Boys and the Watching, it didn't just continue, it arguably got worse.
Worse.
more intense, leading directly towards the Golden Dragon Massacre in September 1977.
The event that everyone remembers. And that had an immediate trigger too, right? Something happened earlier that summer.
Yes, July 4th, 1977. There was an ambush during a firecracker sale took place at the Pingyuan housing projects in Chinatown.
Okay.
A Joe boy named Felix Tiger Huey was killed in that ambush.
So the Golden Dragon was revenge for Tiger Huey's death.
Directly. It was retaliation. The Joe boys believed watching leaders would be at the Golden Dragon restaurant that night, and they went there to target them.
But they didn't hit their targets.
Tragically, no. They missed the gang members entirely. Instead, they killed 5 innocent people having dinner, bystanders, and injured 11 others.
Oh my God. None of them involved in gangs at all.
None. Just ordinary people in the wrong place at the absolutely worst time. It's horrific how that internal conflict spilled out with such devastating consequences for people completely unconnected to it.
Just devastating. And that massacre, that had to be a turning point.
A huge one, absolutely. Public outrage was immense. The police response intensified massively.
How did it change the gang landscape?
Well, for one, the Huaqing kind of emerged as the dominant force after that. And the Joe boys, they were hit hard.
How so?
The pressure from law enforcement was intense. San Francisco police formed a dedicated Asian gang task force, largely because of the Golden Dragon. And that task force focused heavily on dismantling the Joe boys. They were significantly shut down.
So the massacre, in a way, led to their downfall.
In large part, yes. It was the culmination, but also the catalyst for their end as a major force.
It's such a heavy story. The source mentions a memoir, too, Chinese Playground.
Yeah, by Bill Lee, someone who is apparently affiliated, giving a personal look from inside that world. It reminds you these were real people, real lives caught up in this.
Definitely adds another dimension. And the source also lists victims going way back.
Yes, it provides a list starting back in April 1969. And looking through it, it's sobering. Different ages, affiliations, some clearly gang members, others maybe not.
It really drives home the human cost.
Absolutely. It wasn't just abstract violence. It was people losing their lives over years.
You see names. Glenn Fong, Joe Fong's own older brother, killed in March 1970.
Right. Then there's Harry Yang, the professor, a Huaqing mentor figure, killed March 72.
And that horrible Daly City torture murder of Joe Boy Lincoln Louis in 74.
These specific incidents, they paint a really brutal picture. Wasn't clean.
No. And wasn't there a poem mentioned, too?
Yeah, Michael McClure wrote a poem about the death of a Huaqing member, Kin Chun Louis. It shows these events resonated, beyond the immediate crime reports. They impacted the culture.
These weren't just statistics. They were people, families, a whole community living under this shadow.
Exactly. And the timeline just shows this relentless cycle. Attack, retaliation, escalation, over and over.
So wrapping this deep dive up, we've traced the Chung Ching Yee, the Joe boys, from their start amid all those changes in Chinatown in the 60s.
Right. Watch their evolution under Joe Fong, the whole Chung Ching Yee name thing, and then the slide into just brutal rivalry, especially with the Huaqing.
Culminating in the Golden Dragon Massacre, which was horrific in itself, but also became the turning point that led to their decline.
Yeah. So the big takeaway really is seeing how all these pieces fit together.
Yeah.
The immigration shifts, the social dynamics inside Chinatown, the specific rivalries, how it all built up to this period of intense violence.
And for anyone listening, this history, it really offers insights, doesn't it, into how immigration, identity, how communities and subcultures form.
And how things can go wrong. How internal tensions, maybe made worse by outside factors, can spiral into these cycles of violence with, well, just devastating results for everyone.
Which leaves us with a pretty big question to think about, I guess. How much do those external forces like immigration policy or local politics, police actions, how much do they really shape what happens inside a community with groups like these?
That's the core question, isn't it? And what happens when those tensions just fester? When they aren't resolved and just escalate? It's a really sobering history.
It is, but definitely one worth understanding. The dynamics of conflict and maybe, hopefully, how to recognize and prevent it.